Have you ever had to tone down your gayness? I think most of us have to say yes to that question, right? We've all been in that situation where we've had to just tone down our glitter.
I just had to tone down John's gayness because he was talking about masks and ball gags 13 seconds before we before we started.
I was talking about masks, ball gags, and harnesses. Let's be clear. We don't want to be misleading to people.
Right.
So, but have you ever had to tone down your gayness? I think every single one of us has had to tone it down. And I think even if we haven't had to consciously do it, I think we've all been in situations where we just kind of have butched it up a little bit. Or, if we're a lady, we've what is the opposite?
Femmed out a bit.
We femmed out a bit.
Right. But I think that we're talking a little bit, this is a little different than code switching.
Yes.
I think this is just
surviving.
Yeah.
This is more about survival.
More about survival, or more about conditioning from an environmental, social, economic, or social
socioeconomic situation.
Well, a social situation. I think maybe we're going to get into this a little bit more, but specifically family. I think this is specifically family.
Socio-familial economic situation. So in episode number 60 of the Queer Money Podcast, which correlates interestingly with episode number 60 of the Queer Money Follow-Up, we talked with Patrick Riley, and the episode was titled "How to Live Fabulously According to Patrick Riley." And the reason why what Patrick thinks matters is because Patrick is quite awesome. So we met Patrick when we spoke at a Prudential event. We actually spoke at their, it was their corporate center.
Right.
One of their main stages. And Patrick Riley, he was a field producer for the Oprah Winfrey Show and has worked very closely with Oprah Winfrey. And that was his main gig. But throughout his career, and because of his connection with Oprah Winfrey, he has worked with Diana Ross, Bill Clinton, Beyoncé, Mary Tyler Moore, Master P, and a whole number of other celebrities, all up and down the letter scale. And so he's just very well connected and has had an amazing life. And we didn't really know how amazing his life was until we heard his presentation. He spoke before us at this LGBTQ financial experience event in Newark, New Jersey for Prudential. And hearing his story was just so compelling because so he's maybe slightly older than we are, maybe like 5 or 10 years older than we are.
Maybe 5.
Maybe 5.
Maybe he's a lot closer to me than he is to you because we're 3 years apart.
Because I'm still a baby. And his story is a bit different because he's a black man. He grew up in a Southern black, very conservative, at least fiscally conservative and religious and military family. So constantly, he told the stories about constantly throughout his childhood, as he was growing up, like he would want to like pirouette around the living room and jump from couch to couch.
Right. I think that this was the one thing that I kind of resonated with because I love to dance. He talked about how he would jump and from couch to couch and do a high kick. And it was Leroy on Fame that was inspiring him, right? And so he was inspired. And for all of those of you who are younger millennials or younger, you just don't understand what we're talking about. But for the rest of you,
everybody loves Fame.
Fame was a very big show during the 80s. And there were characters who were not overtly gay, but you kind of got the impression that they might be gay. And so I think for the rest of us who were gay inside, we resonated with those characters.
There's a character
right,
I can
exactly.
kind of relate to. There's something about them that's familiar.
Right.
And so so Patrick said he would have these moments in his childhood where he didn't really realize it at the time, but when somebody called attention to it, he realized that he wasn't being, enough of a boy. He wasn't butching it up enough. And so he felt like he realized that there were times that he just kind of had to tone down his gayness. And it wasn't until he got a little bit older that he realized what it is that he was actually having to sort of tone down. But then he even talked then about how he had to he acknowledged that it wasn't fair that he had to tone down his gayness and that it wasn't right and that he shouldn't have to do it. But he did acknowledge that he had to sort of navigate the playing field with his family because they were very religious. They were quite conservative from at least from a religious perspective. They were a military family. So his dad was he was smart, but his dad was very had a very militaristic sort of expectation of his family. Like, you're a boy, you play sports, and you're rough, and you stick by the rules, and so
I think it was interesting because one of the things that he mentioned that when he was in school, he really wanted to get involved in music and dance,
right.
But his father kind of basically poo-pooed that, and so he went towards drama or the theater because he knew that there would be times in the theater they would put on musicals and he would be able to sing and dance, right? So he was finding his creative outlet in a way that was comfortable for the environment that he was in.
Right. And so he talked about, he said, over time, what I learned is my own patience to communicate with the ignorance has helped me feel more a part of my family. And that was a revelation he felt over time. And what I think is interesting is, we interviewed Emil Wilbuck, where he talked about how he had to navigate his career in sort of the hip hop industry as a black gay man. We have Patrick Riley talking about how he had to navigate especially his younger years as a black gay man. And then we're going to we'll be covering here in a couple of episodes here, Robert Carter, who is a black gay man from Charleston, and how he had to navigate the waters of being a gay boy when he was younger. And now he's in
Le Trocaderos.
Le Trocaderos is, a ballet group.
A men's ballet group.
And so how he had to navigate those waters. And it does seem like there's this extra layer that from the people that we've interviewed and the black gay men that we know, that there's this extra layer of challenge that we haven't necessarily had to face as gay men.
Well, I think
is that the right way to say that?
I don't know I think that there is kind of there is a layer of homophobia in the African American community that is not necessarily as prevalent in at least in the Caucasian community, in the white community. I think that there is this overt, this feeling of hypermasculinity. I think that also is similar to the Hispanic community. There is this appearance of hypermasculinity and machoism that isn't as common for white gay men or young white gay men to deal with. Not that it doesn't happen, but I think it's a little bit more common. And I think that it's specifically you look at cultures that are very religious, right? So you have the cultural aspect of religion in the African American community, the cultural aspect of religion in the Hispanic community, and so those are probably more dominant than maybe necessarily the case in for those of us who are white. Although I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and Jesus. It was palpable how my father especially didn't want me to be gay or didn't want me to express myself in any way that might appear to be gay, right? And that's why I'm no longer connected to my family. But I think that this is, what you're talking about here. What we learned from these interviews with Patrick, with Robert, with Emil, is that there is a way of navigating it, right? There's a way of navigating this in your family, in society, so that you can come out. As you mentioned, Patrick had to come out in layers because he knew that there was a time and place to come out to some people. And I think that it's maybe a little different than what a lot of young people are dealing with, or the way that they come out today I think it's a little bit more nuanced when coming out in the 80s and 90s than it is today in the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s.
Right. I think this is why LGBTQ people, and maybe it's more older LGBTQ people and less so than those today, though I'm not entirely sure. But I think this is why, and we've read this in other articles, not just in our own content and our own experience, is that there's this extra level of intuitiveness that LGBTQ people have because we have had to navigate the waters. And some of us do that better than others, and some of us do it more abruptly than others, but we've all had to navigate those waters, so to speak. And if we've reached our ages of 30 and 40 and 50 and anything beyond, I mean, we've just had a different experience than those who I hate, I hate to say it again, but the stereotypical straight white male who didn't have anything to navigate except for, to don't suck too much.
Right. I think what you're talking about is, as queer people, in almost every single circumstance we enter where it's a non-familiar circumstance, we are looking out for, is this a safe space? Is this a safe person? Can I be myself around this person? Do I need to code switch? We're doing that all the time. So we're constantly reading the room. We're reading the people that we're with. We are reading our boss. We're reading the person who comes to our house to do work for us, right? I mean, you invite a plumber into your house, or you invite an electrician in your house, and you sometimes wonder, is it okay for you to say, this is what my husband and I do, or my wife and I do, right? Or this is the way we live, right? In fear that if you do that, there may be some sort of repercussion because of coming out. So you're constantly looking for that. I think of the example of when we had movers help move us into our condo here in Las Vegas, and we were a little sensitive to talk about whether or not we were actually a couple until we kind of felt out the situation.
It was pretty obvious because all they had to do was move in at one single bed.
No, we have a bed. We have a second bedroom that has a bed, right? Exactly. But I think that this is what Patrick was talking about, is this whole idea of feeling the situation out and coming out in layers. And what was interesting is for him to tell his story about how different members of his family reacted to him. So one of the things
so before you go there, to be clear, so there was a particular episode on the Oprah Winfrey Show where she was telling people stories about the moment that they came out.
No, one moment they realized they were gay.
The moment they realized they were gay. Yes. And so she felt like it was all celebrities that they had interviewed at this point. And Oprah said, "Well, I feel like this is a pretty narrow perspective. Not everybody in the world is a celebrity. And so, what's it like for like a more regular person to come out?" And so they asked Patrick, having been a field producer for Oprah.
Not that Patrick is a regular person, but he's not in front of the camera as much.
He's not in front of the camera every day. He's not a celebrity. And so they asked him if he would be willing to share his story. Well, by that point, Patrick had come out to his immediate family, and some of his closest friends knew that he was gay. But for everybody else, his extended family, his church members, other people in his community, it was kind of assumed that he was gay. And he said there was sort of this don't ask, don't tell kind of policy in his community. Like, we know, but we don't want to talk about it. And we don't want to acknowledge it. Well, so here Patrick was approached with this opportunity, and he agreed to do it somewhat reluctantly. And he shared his story, and then his story was shared with 22, 25 million people around the world. And up until that point, anytime there was any reference to Patrick, whether there was a glimpse of him in a newsreel or his name was mentioned in the credits of the Oprah Winfrey Show, all his friends and family would call him. They'd be so proud. His friends and family would call his parents, be so proud. It was all very exciting. Coming from the community that he came from, this is just an exciting experience for them. Well, when he came out to 25 million people on the Oprah Winfrey Show, there were crickets. Nobody called him. Yeah. Nobody said anything whatsoever. And it was very obvious that this was not going down well.
Right. And it's what I think is so interesting about that is, at that point in time, probably one of the most prominent, most well-viewed opportunities for him in his career, and his family, his friends, his church members, no one was there to celebrate that with him, where they all wanted to be a part of the celebration for anything other than that.
Right.
I'm sure that it weighed heavily on him.
And before we go further, we need to acknowledge, because I'm just learning how to use this tool. Oaken Bay says hello. Hello, Oaken Bay. Yeah. I love that name. That's pretty cool. And then we have Mark Silverman said he loved the reference to code switching. Yeah, and we've talked a lot about code.
I would love to say that we came up with that,
but
that is definitely not our term. We talked about that on the Gayish podcast with Kyle and Mike about a little bit about code switching, and I think we talked a little bit about that on the Minority podcast as well, about code switching. But
you can still call us brilliant.
Yeah, right. But I think that what is so interesting and valuable and inspiring about Patrick's story is that through all this, a lot of us would probably feel a sense of anger, resentment, irritation, wanting to either kind of basically leave or shun. We've been shunned by our family. We're going to shun them. But he didn't do that. He was there for his family.
He tried to stay engaged.
And another amazing story that he talks about is how he dealt with this with one of his family members. It was his brother. His brother was in jail, and his brother had a son, and obviously his son was not in jail. And Patrick was helping raise this son. And
at the time, he was living under his roof.
Right. And he was, at this particular time, it was post high school, and he was encouraging and helping him get started in his career. And I will say this, I just from assuming what was going on in the particular story, evidently Patrick's brother found Jesus, right? And felt the need to send him a written letter telling him how he was going to go to hell. And
Patrick for being gay.
Right. Patrick was going to go to hell for being gay. And it was interesting that, I think many of us would feel a lot of anger and want resentment and want to go back at a family member because of making this kind of statement. But it was interesting. Patrick just basically said that he wrote a letter back, actually gave it to his nephew to read before, but he wrote a letter back saying that you were in jail, and while you were in jail, I helped raise your son, and this person helped raise your son, and this person helped your son get a job, and this person mentored your son, and this person showed your son what to wear for an interview, and this person was helping your son with and he just basically made this list of individuals, and he basically said, all these people there have been there for your son, and they're all gay. And he left it at that, right? These are the individuals who've been there for your child while you're in prison, and you want to tell us we're all going to go to hell. And he just kind of left it at that. It was interesting because he got an apology letter from his brother.
He did. And so to me, this is why I think Patrick is the archetype of our movement, of what we're trying to help build a community of enlightened gay men who are seeking a higher conversation, a higher consciousness. And that's exactly why we created the 5 building blocks of a happy gay life, which members can get at the debtfreeguys.com/happy gay life for free. It's because there are certain personalities and traits, and there are certain people in our community who are really blazing trails and leading the way. And despite all of the animosity and all of the hurdles that they've had to overcome, they've always been able to sort of be sort of those torchbearers and to continue to strive forward, continue to motivate the community. And we would just love to see more of those people in our community. We love to for everybody to have that opportunity. So not covering every single thing we talked about with Patrick on this particular episode, we wanted to share with you 5 takeaways that we did get from this episode that we can all use to our own benefit to help not only make our own lives better, but maybe help the other people in our life better, as well as maybe help the LGBT community a little bit more. And so Patrick shared 5 tips that he suggested for the LGBTQ community to become stronger as individuals as well as a community. And number 1, he said, and this is definitely hard, and what was interesting is he said this during the very beginning year, the first year of Trump's first term, but he said, we have to trust that the consciousness of society is on our side. It might not always be a direct path. It might not be fast, right. But we have to trust that the long arc of the society's consciousness is playing in our favor.
I think that's an important one, right? It's the positive side of it, focusing on the positive side of what is going on. And I think that was what was clear in a lot of the messages that we got from Patrick when we were talking to him, is that he does focus on the positive side of the circumstances he's in and what he can get from them and what he can share from them. And I think that's really important, right? We all like hanging around and being around positive people. There's even a skit about this on Saturday Night Live, right? Debbie Downer. I guess we have to ask ourselves, if we really want to have that fabulous life, are we the kind of person that is focusing on the positive side of it and trusting that this consciousness of society is on our side? I mean, it's clear, every poll that comes out now, right? Every single poll that comes out now basically says that that society in general believes that queer people should be treated equally as everyone else. They should be allowed to get married. They should have equal rights. There's a clear consciousness that's happening. Unfortunately, I think there's some politicians who are fucking Roblox. I'm just going to put it that way.
And they're serving a microcosm of the community. And,
right.
But that's often, unfortunately, what gets mostly covered in the news and what we get hung up on, which kind of leads to the second tip from Patrick, where he said, we need to always, and I think he probably versioned this from Oprah, we need to always count our blessings. And I remember the quote from Oprah where she said, if we focus on what we don't have, we'll never have enough. But if we focus on what we do have, we'll always have more than enough. And I think that's what he's talking about, is let's focus on the blessings. Let's not it's not to ignore or not to acknowledge that we have some adversity, but if we focus on our blessings, we'll always be able to stay on a positive mindset.
Right. Got a few more comments.
We got a few more comments. I'm so excited about this new tool. I'm just barely learning how to figure out. Mark says, Silverman says,
thank you,
we
Mark.
love what you're doing. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're having fun doing what we're doing, and we're glad that it's helping anybody or inspiring anybody or making anybody's day in any way, shape, or form. And then Mark also shared that that's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Patrick's story is
Go
is
back
a great
and listen
story.
to this podcast. We actually, I was thinking about this while we were listening to this episode yesterday. I was on a run. I was listening to this, and I was like, we really need to get Patrick back on the podcast.
Well, we said we would, so we wouldn't be honest people.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one, the third point that Patrick talked about is one that I think is very interesting because it ties into a lot of what John and I have been studying and learning about happiness, about giving back. And what he encourages individuals to do to live a fabulous life is to become a mentor. When you are giving back to others with your time and your knowledge and your support, you actually help and you get to watch somebody grow and change, right? And that is inspiring, that you know that you're a part of helping somebody else's life get better. And so I think this was interesting because both Emil Welbeck and Patrick talk about this whole idea of raising up, especially for their community, raising up other young gay black men. I think that's a really important thing to do. When we even mentioned this on this particular episode, when you have a stage, however big or small it is, if you can use that stage to lift up the other voices of those around you, whether it's mentoring or actually giving a place for them to speak, then you are actually helping change the world. You're actually bringing about the kind of thing that all of us want.
We need.
Yeah, exactly.
So tip number 4 is probably related to tip number 2, and that is to be an activist. We always want to count our blessings, but like I said, we don't want to ignore that we do have adversity and challenges that we do have to face. And in that regard, we need to be an activist. We need to continue to push for progress. And there's this challenge, I think, that you have, especially after the Trump years, right? We're all kind of tired. Right. And my concern with now that we have Biden and Harris in office is that we're all going to be like, all right, let's just take a break.
Yeah.
It's not as anxiety-ridden as it used to be. And in fact, I saw a friend of ours post today, the best part about today is that I have no idea what the president's doing. And yes, there's that's great, right? We can all sleep a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, we should always know what the president's doing and hold them accountable. It's that now, let's rest for a couple months. I get it, but we can't become ignorant to what's going on because I'm still unhappy with the fact that neither Democrats or Republicans have adequately addressed Social Security. And so now that we have Democrats who control Washington, the momentum's in our favor. Let's get them to actually take action on Social Security. Everybody agrees on it. Let's do it. Yeah. But that's just a microcosm where we got to continue to be activists. We can't rest on our laurels.
And I will add, being a keyboard activist, kind of meh, right? I mean, everyone can get on Facebook and Twitter. Even the former president can get on Facebook and Twitter and be a keyboard activist. Actually working to make things better, that's being a true activist, right?
Yeah.
When
and
you're a
Allison just
keyboard
shared-
activist, you're just complaining.
Absolutely. And Allison just shared, we are getting so much out of giving back to the community. Our chosen family is getting bigger, and so are our hearts.
Yes.
And I love that. And I love being a part of their family. I can't wait
All
to
right.
visit them.
Point number 5 that Patrick brought up was to support LGBTQ up-and-comers. It's a little different than being a mentor, right? This is actually seeing people who are making progress and helping them make even more progress, right? Individuals who their voice is gaining momentum. You know, we see that happening all over the place in the queer community. There's lots of ways that we can support them as up-and-comers, whether it's individuals who are in small business, individuals who are out there in activism, individuals who are in politics. There are lots of ways that we can support LGBTQ up-and-comers.
Yeah, and I think the last election was there were the most out LGBTQ people were actually nominated and voted into office. And so that's just a small example of the benefit of supporting the up-and-comers. Up until they got elected into office, they didn't really have that big of a stage. But only because people supported them were they able to get a slightly larger stage. And now we have these people, transgender individuals, gay people, lesbian people, all sorts of people now are in power positions of influence where they can really help improve the value of all of our lives. And the more that we do that for the members of our community, even when they don't have a stage, especially when they don't have a stage, the better it is for all of us. There's just a lot of benefit that we all get from that.
Yeah. And I'll add, there's a lot of emphasis put on large LGBT organizations, national organizations that have power and influence, right? The opportunity to step up and support small, local LGBT organizations, whether that's financially or getting out there and licking envelopes or stuffing ballot boxes, well, not stuffing ballot boxes, stuffing mailboxes, doing that kind of work to really help at the local level, or finding a politician, an LGBTQ politician in a place like Idaho or Mississippi, and donating to them or their causes or those organizations goes a lot further than just dropping money in gigantic boxes at big organizations. We can actually make more progress. And so I think this is that whole idea of helping LGBT up-and-comers.
Absolutely, 100%. So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Queer Money Follow-Up series. Here is your Queer Money Follow-Up takeaway from this episode. Go to debtfreeguys.com/happy and download your free copy of the 5 building blocks of a happy gay life. And then in the comments below, please let us know. Have you ever had to tone down your gayness, even for just a little bit, even for the first 5 minutes that you had to walk into a room? We would love to hear what your experiences are, and if you have anything similar to what Patrick experienced. Yeah. Then join us tomorrow for episode 61 of the Queer Money Follow-Up series, where we cover episode 61 of the Queer Money podcast, and we're going to discuss, where we're actually going to talk about what we discuss on the 5 steps to prepare for a financial emergency while you are sleeping. That's exciting. And then again, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this channel and set notifications on this channel so you can participate on the conversation, because Oaken, Mark, and Allison have made our day by participating on this conversation. It makes these a lot more funner, as I like to say. Thank you all for joining us and for watching another episode. We will see you tomorrow.